Continuing with Isaiah, it's tough going. It's so dense. So I prayed, said, Lord, give me this vision, give me understanding of this book. And I think I finally got it. It says that Isaiah had 60-year career, and this is just a short selection of his sermons. So in it, he teaches a nation. They're young people, they're old people, just like Christianity, who's been reading the Bible for over 60 years, and they're new Christians. So we need to go back to those early stories because they may not be familiar with it. We cannot take it for granted that everybody knows what's in here. Even I, at this age, after over 60 years, is still finding Isaiah tough going. That I've never read Isaiah through. All of us knows about Isaiah. There's no doubt about it. Unto us a child is born. I mean, we take excerpts out of it, but never the whole narrative. But reading the whole narrative is so enlightening in the sense that you understand the situation of the nation of Israel, and also you understand the historical context, that the kingdom is divided into two: the northern kingdom, which retains the name Israel, and the southern kingdom, which is Judah. Judah, from which David's line comes from, and eventually the Messiah will come from that line. So in spite of the fact that God punishes Judah, but not to the extent as to destroy it, because he promised David that David will always have someone on that throne. So God kept his promises that in the end, when Jesus comes from the line of Judah, when God uses Judah, in the end, he is the king forever, the perfect king, the everlasting king. Really, that image of wonderful counselor, mighty God, is always there, in spite of the fact that Judah, the nation of Judah, fails time and time again. And Isaiah is speaking to them and speaking to the future too, the time when the perfect king comes, when he will rule perfectly, and the remnant is not the nation as a whole of Israel, but the remnant. The remnant means eventually the remnant of the world, not just the Jews, but the Gentiles too. That remnant who subscribe to this kingdom of God, picture vision with God as the perfect king. That remnant is always there. So in the end, that remnant becomes the people in the world that responds, that are obedient. And Isaiah always have this vision. He even called his firstborn Shear Jashub, means a remnant will return. So in Isaiah chapter 10, it is like I said, every chapter is so dense. Every line is packed with meaning that if this short program will not be able to encapsulate the whole of Isaiah or even every chapter, because it is so dense. But really, whatever we could get out of it is useful. What was the problem with Judah? And Isaiah was sent to the southern kingdom, to Judah, even as the northern kingdom was being destroyed because of the apostasy. And we can read, I think in 2 Kings, verses 22 to chapter 22 to 23, the problems with the northern kingdom, albeit the southern kingdom does the same thing, but not to that, I suppose, not to the extent that the northern kingdom, they were completely given away to idol worship. They were seduced by the worship of Baal, since they live among those people. Baal worship, we do not understand. Okay, we worship gods that are not gods, but it goes much more than that. The practice is much more than, it's not just having a big idol there, but rather, I was reading further on I think in Jeremiah. Jeremiah continues after Isaiah died, And Jeremiah continues to warn the people of Judah, the destruction is coming, return to the Lord. And there came a good king, good kings replace bad kings replace good kings. So there was a series of kings. So Josiah was a good king. And he found that, some workmen repairing, renovating the temple found a book, the book of the law. It says we don't really know. And he read it and said, oh my goodness, we have not done anything that we're supposed to do. The worship in Leviticus, the righteous, the moral laws. So he says, from now on, we're going to do it. And he said, he looked in the temple and we read that he removed the Baal worship. It's like, my goodness, it's not just Baal worship in your house, but in the temple of God, to the righteous God, you have to remove the idols of Baal, the Ashtoreth poles. What is going on? And even Ahaz and Manasseh were noted in the Bible as sacrificing their son, Ahaz, his oldest son, heir apparent to his throne, to Baal. And it shows you the apostasy. So in chapter 10, it says very simple things. You are unjust. That means you favor certain people in the justice system. You forget, you ignore the poor, those who have no money for lawyers, or the widows, the orphans. You have just ignored all these things that I'm concerned about. It's like so simple, right? It is really simple. It's not like, even this life, this Christian life, it's not like highfalutin that you cannot understand it. The worship is so dense. No, it's very simple. The obedience, the care for the people whose voices are not heard. And here in verse, and that's what they failed to do, besides the big thing of Baal worship and the not just in Baal worship, there is the sacrifice of children, but also there were temple prostitutes. And somewhere in one of the books, male and female temple prostitutes. So who goes to the temple except the men, the Jewish men, and they go to the temple. There are male and female prostitutes there. And somewhere, I forgot where I read it, the Sodomites in the temple. Those are the male prostitutes. So here in chapter 10, verse 5, it said, oh, Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is mine indignation. The rod and staff. Here we have that image of rod and staff again. What have we learned? Psalm 23, where it speaks, the rod and staff of God being with us, following us. So the rod and staff of God is used by God to protect, to love, to have mercy, to guide and lead in Psalm 23. But here, it's not used that way. God is using his rod and his staff to punish the people of Judah, to bring them back. See? So he does not come personally, but he uses his servants, enemies of the nation. Assyria, he says, Assyria will be my rod and staff to punish you, see, to take the spoil and to take the prey, to tread them like mire of the streets. It shows you how bad it is to steal, kill, and destroy. It's no why, because they are apostates, see, and whose graven image, verse 10, and my hand have found the kingdoms of the idols, and whose graven images did excel them of Jerusalem and Samaria. Jerusalem is the southern kingdom, capital of the southern kingdom, Jerusalem. Samaria, capital of the northern kingdom. So both are guilty. And also here, we continue to read verse 12. But after God has done with Samaria and the northern kingdom, Jerusalem and the southern kingdom, by using Assyria to punish them. And after I've done with that, Assyria is not going to escape my wrath, God says. I will punish the stout heart, the fruit. I will punish the fruit of the stout heart of the king of Assyria. Assyria will not escape. Because Assyria is proud. He says, whoa, look, there's no God. My God is the God, and by my strength and my might, I have conquered. And that is the proud heart of Assyria. It's my wisdom. I'm prudent. I've removed the bounds of the people and robbed their treasures. And my hand have found as a nest the riches of the people. That means the plunder. So it is me, says Assyria, proud Assyria, not knowing that they were used by God. So it doesn't matter. So the axe that God used, verse 15, the axe that God used to chop down his people, he's using it against Assyria. So the axe that was used, the rod and the staff that is used by God, that is Assyria, is now being used on Assyria. So God is just, God is right. And as usual, Isaiah in every chapter does not leave the people in a hopeless, dire straits. He says, the remnant, verse 21, the remnant shall return. For though my people of Israel be as the sea of the sand, it's not everybody's going to be saved, but the remnant, the righteous remnant, always. So the righteous remnant is not supposed to be afraid of Assyria. For even though you undergo that tough situation of punishment under Assyria, God will bring you back again. So there is another verse I have to find where in Isaiah it is, something that I always treasured. In quietness and trust is your strength. Now I know where it comes from. Even as the Assyrians were pushing against the walls of Jerusalem, God said to Isaiah to tell the king, do not worry, they will not come in here. In quietness and trust is your strength. In quietness and trust in your God is your strength. So if you fear God, if you are obedient, you have no fear of anything else in the world, even as the world rages on. And in the last verse of chapter 10, and the 34, and the haughty shall be humbled. That means the proud in heart. Those who say, it is me, my wisdom, my strength, and that got me these things. And he shall cut down the thickets of the forest with iron, and Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one. There are lots of cryptic things. That why suddenly you bring Lebanon in the picture? Why suddenly do you bring this? It's not just using rod and staff, you bring this axe. Throughout Isaiah, it speaks of the nation of Israel, nation of Assyria, as being trees and be cut off. And Lebanon being one of them. Trees of Lebanon, cedar. When cedar is cut off, it will never grow back. So next we will learn about the stump of the tree.